You don't need more money. You need a better plan. Most people want to budget, but get stuck before they ever start. Let me show you how to build a budget that actually works. This is the same process that I used to build my net worth fast while still in my 20s. And I promise it's a whole lot easier than you think. By the end of this video, you'll have a budget that you can actually stick to and the clarity to feel in control of your money. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, I'm Preston Callhammer, and I love helping people with their finances. I've achieved financial successes in my 20s that many would only dream of, and this is where I share the things that I've learned along the way. Today's video builds on my last one where I shared the 7 budgeting habits. If you missed that one, go ahead and hit pause and check that one out first. I'll link it here and in the description below. It is time to jump into the budgeting itself, and let's take a look first, starting with that income. So the first thing that we want to do in our budget is figure out our income. Now, depending on how your work is set up, depending on what you do, how many people you have in your household, all those different factors, you might have different number of paychecks. To keep things simple, I'm just going with the typical standard 2 paycheck for the month. So we've got that set up here. We'll have 2 paychecks coming in. I'm gonna go through and add numbers into the paychecks for a few different scenarios depending on different income levels, and we will see those in just a moment here. I went through and added some numbers for different income levels. These numbers that you see here might not be exactly what you make, but you might be able to see a range of similar to where you're at. Ultimately, you just need to figure out what your income is. Today we're using numbers, but the formulas that we're going to use should all apply in Google Sheets and Excel. So whichever platform you're on, these formulas should all apply the same. And the only thing that you need to do to get your total income is we're going to go into the cell below it. We'll hit that equal sign to bring up the formula bar, and we'll use the formula sum. So that's just sum formula. Click on that, and we'll take the sum and highlight the cells that we want to take the sum of. Sum just means total. And when we do that and hit enter, it's going to give us that sum below there. So in this first circumstance, the $700 and $800 paychecks would equal $1,500 of income for that month. Since I'm doing multiple circumstances, I'm just gonna drag that formula across the bottom here to give you an example of all the different incomes that are possible. Again, you can kind of look at the one that looks most similar to yours, and we'll jump on into that next step. Step 2 is going to be examining our fixed costs to see what is the same cost every single month. So a few examples that I put down here on the screen, you see our housing, subscriptions, Wi-Fi, things of that nature where every single month you have the same payment. So I'm gonna go through and add some general numbers to those, and I will be right back. I went through and added some general numbers of what might make sense for some of the fixed costs that you would have consistent month to month. Again, these numbers are arbitrary. I just put them together, so yours may not look exactly like this. Yours might be a little bit lower. Congratulations, you're saving money. If yours are a little bit more expensive, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is always a good thing to reconsider. Maybe I can cut back on how many subscriptions I have, or how much I'm paying for Wi-Fi or housing or anything of that nature. What we're going to look at here is, again, the total. We need to know how much are we spending every single month on the things that aren't changing. So again, we're going to use that same formula. We'll use the equal sign to pull up the formula bar, do the sum function, and we're going to take the sum of all of these above here. And once we enter that in there, I'm going to go ahead and copy that across. Again, if you have more than just these categories of fixed costs, you might need to do more than just 3 things that you're adding together. Or maybe you have fewer, or if you combine some into something, again, using like subscriptions as a heading, that might contain 3 or 4 different things if you have different subscriptions at different places. This number is going to give us what we need to help us going forward, so we know exactly the amount that we're paying every single month, and we'll take that and plug it into the rest if you jump right into this next section. Step 3 is to start choosing our categories. As you can see here, I copied down the income from the top. So all I did was just a simple formula in here. So if you double click on that, I just did the equals number and put that in as equals the cell up here. So that's going to be equal to G4, and it just copies down that number. If we were to go up here and to change this paycheck now to 650 instead of 700, it would adjust this cell down here as well. But for now, we'll stick with what we had with that $700 paycheck. What I'm going to do from here is add some general categories, and I'll be right back in just a moment with those added in. Okay, those categories are added in here now, as you can see. These are not the be-all end-all categories. These are just some things that came to mind in general for what some categories might look like for you. Depending on your circumstance, if you have kids, you might have additional categories where you need to do school payments or different things like that. Again, you need to tailor this section to what makes the most sense for you. At the end of the day, you just need a category for all of the money that you're going to spend. So if you have certain things that you know you'll spend, just make sure you have a category that it can go under. We've made it to step 4. This is where we get to start allotting money to the different budget items. This is where you get to have a choice. You can choose to do things in either a percentage approach or in a dollar amount approach. So as you see here, I've got this set up to do the percentage approach. If you choose to take the little bit easier route of doing the dollar amount approach, you would just skip that column there and not have that section in your budget. The percentage approach gives you more details and it gives you more specifics month to month. The dollar amount approach is a little bit easier, less on the math side, but it's not as detail oriented. That's where you get to decide. From there, this is where you get to be creative and go in and add whatever you think you want to budget for each item, and go through and make adjustments as you see that you maybe have too much in one category or not enough in another, and just play around with it until you get it right. I'm gonna go ahead and add in a bunch of numbers that made sense to me here, and we'll be right back. You can see that I added in a bunch of numbers. Again, you're looking at whatever category makes the closest amount to where you're at. That would be a good guide for you. But what you're going to be doing is creating your own categories and giving them your own numbers. As you can see, what I did here is I use the percentage approach to determine how much we want to allot to each amount. Again, you'll have to take some of those fixed costs and determine those independently of the percentages. What that means is if you've got a $1,000 a month rent payment, but you're not making this category, you might need to figure out what percentage that $1,000 is of your total income and then work off of it from there. That's why it's usually best to start with the fixed costs, especially if you're going to be doing the percentage approach, because those won't change depending on how much you make throughout the month, but the other things can change. So for example, if your retirement investing is 15% and 1 month you make that $1,500, but then the next month you end up making way more, you get an extra $1,000, you see there that $2,500, then you might have $375 invested instead of $225 invested the prior month. So that's one of the advantages of doing the percentage approach. Again, it is a little bit more work. And if you choose to take the dollar amount approach, what you would do is just skip that entire percentage column and just go in and choose whatever numbers you want to give. So again, for a giving, I did 10%. So that could be like tithe if you're involved at church, or whichever charity or whatever you would like to give to. Savings, again, you want to make sure you're setting aside savings every single month and making that a priority. Again, you want to take what works for you, take the categories that make sense, and choose the numbers that work based on your spending habits, what you want to be spending, and where you think you have opportunities to be better. We made it to step 5. This is where we need to ensure that all of our money is accounted for based on our budget. So that's where that total line is going to come in handy. So you see the total line here should equal the number of our monthly income. So in the example that I set up here, this is already done. But again, you want to take the time to make sure you're adjusting your numbers to get there. So if your house payment, for example here under the $6,000 income, was instead $3,000, then we might need to figure out somewhere else that we need to cut back so that we can have the level of income available that we're actually spending. We don't want to be spending $6,600 if we're only making $6,000. So this is where we'll have to take some time and play around with it. It might take a little bit of adjusting to see what area you can reduce from or which area you need to change in order to make what you need to do happen. At the end of the day, what you need to do is make sure that your total number of income is equal to the total number that you've budgeted. This doesn't mean that you're spending all of your money, but that you're planning out where all of it goes. So again, savings can be a part of that, but it should be budgeted and it should be planned so that you know exactly where each dollar is going. Okay, step number 6, you have your budget created. Now it's time to figure out how you want to follow your plan. Again, this is a place where you get to choose and decide what works for you. What I personally do is we'll write down every single transaction, every single spending that we do throughout the month, we will write down in a task app, and at the end of the month, we just go through and write them down into our budget and compare against the things that we've done, and it allows us to track along the way. If you have a different way that works for you, again, you need to find what works best. The main component that you need to take away here is that you need to track it. If you don't track your progress, you won't know how you're doing in comparison to your budget, and you won't have a way to tell if you're actually doing what the budget says or if you're just doing whatever you did in the past. So taking a look at this $8,000 income slot here, if we were to go in and maybe we ended up spending, instead of $800 on giving, we ended up doing only $750. In savings, we only got to put in $300 this month. Maybe the fixed costs and the housing costs probably are going to stay the same, but maybe transportation, we didn't travel as much, so we only did $300. But on the personal discretional spending, we got carried away with clothes shopping and ended up spending $500. As you can see here, as we put these in, you'll see that you'll have places where you're over and places that you're under. And this is where you get to track and see how you've done, see if you need to taper back anywhere, or if you need to adjust for next time, which will lead us into our next step here in just a moment. Ultimately, what we need to do is track how we've done and see if we're staying within the budget, going under the budget, over the budget, and that will allow us to know how we're doing, if we need to stick with it, and any adjustments that we need to make. We are now at the last step, which is making adjustments as necessary and just keeping up with the budget. In step number 6, we were tracking and keeping up with the numbers. In this step, we get to use those to help us make informed decisions. If I see that I'm consistently overspending in my personal and discretional category right down here, it's possible that I may need to adjust that. So the two ways that I can adjust are either to increase the allotment that I give myself, so whether I increase that percentage or the dollar amount, or I need to change my spending habits, and I need to decide next time I want that cup of coffee or whatever it might be that I want, I'm going to say no to myself because the budget doesn't let me. On the flip side of that, if there's places that we need more. So one of the things that I went through personally was the transportation fund that I have for myself was not big enough when I first started doing it. So after a few months, I realized almost every month I was spending more on gas than I thought I would. And at the end of the day, I need the gas to get to and from work. I need the gas to get to the places I'm going. So that's probably not going to change. So I had to change that number. So I went in and I changed to make a higher allotment scheduled for the budget so that we have that ready to go ahead of time. As you do this, you'll never get it perfect, and that's one of the exciting but can also be frustrating things, is that you'll never have it completely right, but you want to be constantly adjusting and correcting based on anything that's not going the way you want it to, or anything new that's introduced, such as having a baby or anything like that, where you might have a new life event that changes what you need a budget for. Your budgeting process should be complete. Don't forget to leave a comment if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to share with anybody else. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this in the future. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.